Hello, here's Fullstack Dev, and in this video we're gonna create our first Lambda. So let's get started with small explanation. AWS Lambda is a service which is responsible for running Lambda functions, which in fact are just functions in your code. They allows us to create serverless infrastructure. Infrastructure which is running without servers and which setups the whole environment on demand. Imagine it like a car. You turn it on, drive to your destiny, and then you turn it off. You don't have to have your car running all the time to be able to drive. Exactly the same is with Lambdas. You turn it on by making a request, execute the code, and then you can turn it off. You don't have to have your server running all the time. But it also has some downsides. The first call to your Lambda takes much more time than the next ones. It can take up to several seconds. To prevent it, you can use some warm-up mechanism to warm up your Lambdas as they always stay prepared, but it's more advanced topic. For the purpose of this tutorial, we won't worry about this issue. As it is the first video in the series, before we're gonna do some work, first we have to set up the tools. What you need to have installed? First, Visual Studio. I'm using the 2019 version, but if you are working on 2017, it's okay. Generally, nothing changes between these two versions in area of AWS. Second, AWS CLI. We'll be executing some commands from command line, especially for deploying new versions of our app, and CLI will be best for it. In order to find it, you can type AWS CLI in Google search and select the first link from official Amazon website. Here, on the right side, you can select the version for your operating system. After downloading it, you will be guided through standard process of installation. When you select the folder, then just click install and wait for a moment. You can check if everything has installed correctly by typing inside command line interface command AWS help. You will get some information about AWS, and it means that your CLI is working correctly. And the last thing to download is AWS Toolkit for Visual Studio. It will make our work easier. That's because it gives us the possibility to create projects using AWS template. We'll of course modify them, but we won't start from zero. You can find it by searching for AWS Toolkit for Visual Studio. Here, also select the first link from Amazon website, and I will select the version for Visual Studio 2017 and 2019. It will redirect you to Visual Studio Marketplace, where from you can download it directly. Okay, so after downloading you will be guided through the standard process of installation, and we are almost ready to go. But the most important thing that is missing is AWS account. You have to register on AWS website. You can do it by selecting Sign into the console and then create a new AWS account. But here I have to warn you. Generally, AWS is a paid service. They have a free plan where you can use their services for free, and many will be using those free services. But if you exceed the limit of the free account, you're gonna get a bill at the end of the month. So always it's better to check what is in the free plan. You can find all the information on official AWS website when you search for AWS free tier. So here it is nicely described what you can use for free. Let's for example check Lambda. Okay, here it is. 1 million requests monthly, so that's about 1 request per 2.5 seconds. It's a lot. Generally, as you can see, a lot of services have 750 hours free monthly. That's because the month with 31 days have 744 hours. So you can have one database instance running for 1 month for free. But it lasts only for 12 months, so after you complete your work, make sure you deleted all the stuff that you just created. Overall, during this tutorial series, we'll use mostly free services in amounts that are free. But in one place I will show you better solution, which involves using paid service. I'll warn you before using it, so you will be 100% conscious while you are doing it. Of course, the best solution, which I'm always using, is to delete all my work after I are finished. Then you won't get paid, because AWS charges per hour of usage or per data storage or request execution. So don't be afraid of using it. Just always make sure that you are using it for free. Okay, after you log into AWS, you will see AWS console. Here, you can create all the services that you need. We'll start with Lambda. You can find it by typing inside services section, or you can use the cool feature. Here, you can pin the most used services, so you can access them faster. Creating first Lambda on AWS is like writing hello world first time in a new programming language. So let's create our first one. Let's go to create a function. Here, we just have to name it and name the role which allows this Lambda execution. Let's use hello world and hello world role. We can also select the runtime execution to .NET Core. What it is needed for? The name is needed for recognizing which Lambda function you want to call, and the role is for security purposes. It would be really unsecure if everyone could execute your code. So we attach a role to Lambda and only clients with permissions can execute it. Okay, so let's click create, and here we have it. You might ask what this function is doing. Let's figure that out. In order to fire a Lambda, you have to configure test event. It is just a JSON file which you send to your Lambda. Imagine it like a parameter of your method, which you need to pass. We have to give it a name, and let's leave it empty, so just empty JSON will be sent. And let's click test. Okay, so it succeeded. Let's see the response. Okay, hello from Lambda. Yeah, that's cool. If you want to change what this Lambda is doing, we can upload here zip file with the code that will be executed. But it is not the best way. Generally, doing something in the console manually, like we do it now, creating Lambda by clicking in this AWS console, is not very practical. It's because we don't register it. We don't register it like an action, which can be reproducible. So, if we create a really big architecture from AWS console and we want to reproduce it, for example on different environment, we have to click manually everything. That's really unproductive and might lead to some errors because of manual work. Wouldn't it be cool to describe your architecture and tell AWS that we always want to have it created in the same way? And here comes to play CloudFormation. CloudFormation is a service working as infrastructure as a code. Yeah, so you might already figure it out. We'll describe our infrastructure as JSON file, we'll upload this file to AWS, and AWS will create all those services in a couple of seconds. So let's get started with it. We'll create new project in Visual Studio. If you haven't saw this new menu before, check out my video about new features of Visual Studio 2019. Okay, here I will search for AWS. If you don't see these AWS templates, you might have the AWS Toolkit extension turned off. So then, you can easily turn it on in Visual Studio Extension menu section. I'll choose AWS Serverless Application without tests. I name it Inventory Manager as the name of our microservice. So here, in this window, I will select Empty Serverless Application. And here we have it. Let's check what have been created. We've got several files out of the box. The first one is called AWS Lambda Tools Defaults.json. It is a JSON file which helps during the deployment of our application. It is not the CloudFormation template, it is just a file which determines where the app should be deployed. Inside, we've got several properties. The first property, information, tells you exactly what I said about this file. The next one is profile. Here, it is set to default, and it is the way of getting credentials to AWS. Because during deployment, you might get prompted to provide credentials to your AWS account. You have to be authorized to upload your services architecture. Important here is the region. I haven't talked about that before, but generally, AWS has its servers placed all across the world. They are split into regions, and each region has own availability zones. It is a good practice to select the region nearest to you, so the request will take less time. All the list of available regions you can find on official AWS website by searching for AWS region. I have selected Frankfurt, which here is mapped to EU Central 1. Availability zones are just different locations of servers placed in one region for the disaster recovery purposes. So if one server room gets flooded, for example, your application will get hosted from another availability zone. Then the configuration. You might use release or debug depending on the environment we're deploying. Framework. It is important to notice that AWS supports .NET Core from version 2.1 at the day of this video. No support for .NET Standard. Next, we got S3 prefix. S3 is AWS service which works like a storage for files. You can store their files in so-called buckets, something like a higher order for directories. So our project will be zipped and uploaded to S3 bucket named Inventory Manager. The template is a reference to file describing our infrastructure. Yes, CloudFormation file. And if you want to pass some parameters to the template, we can add them here. It is used often for selecting environment where it should be deployed. So you can create those Lambda tools files for different environments with different template parameters specified here. Let's go to the next file, the function.cs. It is a C# file which describes what our Lambda should be doing. It is this function which will be executed when calling Lambda. Generally, it is wrapped in API gateway request and response objects, but underneath sits standard C# code. So yeah, it looks like API controller, except this Lambda serializer which needs to be added to this file. We've got the README file. You can find some important information here. And then the serverless template. We'll go through the details of it during all videos in this tutorial series. But what you need to remember now is that it contains of different sections. And the most important section is called resources. Here we'll describe all the services that we want to create. So our first service will be Lambda function, and this function have properties described here. I won't explain all of them right now, because you might find it boring to talk about code that is already written. In next video, when we will create a Lambda from zero, we'll have to add those properties, and then I will explain everything thoroughly. Besides that, we got the outputs, which are creating an AWS API gateway. So just an web API for calling our Lambda. Okay, let's do something more interesting. Let's change the response that we return from Lambda and let's deploy it. I will change the body of the response to "My first Lambda is alive." Okay, let's deploy it and check if it's working. First, what we need to do is to create S3 bucket where the Lambda code will be uploaded. I'll do it in AWS console right now and we'll move it to CloudFormation template in the next video. Okay, you have to go to S3 service and here select create a bucket. We have to give it a DNS compliant name. What does it mean? We can only use small letters and words will be connected with dashes. So let's name it inventory-manager-bucket. Here we can click next through these steps and finish the creation. Okay, here it is. Next, you have to open command line, navigate to your project and then write an AWS command. .NET Lambda deploy -serverless -cfg AWS Lambda tools default.json -pcfg true. Okay, it might look a little bit complicated. Let me explain it. .NET Lambda deploy serverless serves for deploying your app to AWS and creating architecture based on serverless.template file. The -cfg specifies the location of your tool's defaults file, so your config file. You can translate the -cfg to configuration. The -pcfg set to true says that it will override your tool's defaults file. If you get prompted during the deployment for specifying, for example, region, because you don't have it set in tools defaults file, then your file will have your selection added automatically. It is really helpful if you have your Lambda tools file very empty, so it will be automatically added and you won't need to do it next time. You might understand the -pcfg as shall I persist configuration. Let's run this command and yeah, here we get prompted. We have to give our CloudFormation stack a name. Easy job, of course, inventory manager. Okay, now it wants the S3 bucket that we just created. It was inventory-manager-bucket. Here we have it now. As you can see, now it zips our code and uploads to the S3 bucket. And now it creates the resources that we specified in the serverless.template file. Okay, it is ready. Let's check it out. We have to go to Lambda service and here you can find our newly created Lambda. The old one is the hello world and the new one is just called inventory manager get. And that's because the function in code is named just get. Let's jump into it and test it. We'll remove all those properties from JSON template. We don't need them. And I will name this event first Lambda, but it really doesn't matter how you name it. Let's click test. Okay, here it succeeded. And the response, yeah, my first Lambda is alive, as we changed. Great job. You have learned tons of stuff. You discovered what is AWS Lambda and how it works. You can now create CloudFormation template, integrate it with C# code and deploy to AWS. And you have also created an S3 bucket. That's a lot of knowledge and a great basis for future improvement. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them in comments section under this video. I thank you very much for spending a great time with me working on AWS. Don't forget to subscribe and see you in my next video.